Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy University. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm very excited today to have my guest, who is a certified speaking professional. And I know I've got some very big speaking engagements coming up, and I'm sure she'll hear me do the stuff that I do and all of these interesting habits. But we're actually going to talk about how it's already difficult enough to do public speaking, but how bullying might play a part in that. And so I have with us today Diane DiResta. She's a certified speaking professional, CSP, and is a founder and CEO of DiResta Communications Incorporated. It's a New York City consultancy service servicing business leaders who deserve high-stakes presentations, whether one-to-one, in front of a crowd, or from an electronic platform. She's also the author of Knockout Presentations, and we're going to get to talk about that later. So welcome to Healthy You, Diane.
Thank you, Alan. It's good to be here.
Great. So tell me more about what you do. It's a very interesting career, and I know, I studied broadcast communications. I have never felt I've had any problem speaking, but every time I do, people always find little things to tell us about. So tell me about what you do with you as a professional in your journey.
Well, you may not have a problem, but so many people do have a problem with speaking. I started my career as a certified speech pathologist. So I worked in the New York City schools with children who had speech and language disorders, and then transferred into the adult world, where now I have a business where I focus on working with leaders and executives to be powerful communicators so that they're understood, they're influential, and they're irresistible. And so the way I show up in my business is threefold. In presentations and presentations and public speaking, interpersonal communication and media training. And that's delivered either through keynote speeches, workshops and seminars, one-on-one consulting and coaching, and products and services. So the aim is to make people more powerful. And in the business world, the two things that people need more than anything else is confidence and clarity. Mm-hmm. And that's where I spend a lot of my time. In fact, many times I get calls because someone lacks executive presence. And so they either don't look, sound, or act the part of a leader, and that's where I come in. I help them get to the next level. Yeah,
and I'm here in D.C., so you can imagine I meet a lot of leaders, and I've actually been able to work for 4-star generals and some very top executives. I worked at the Pentagon with the Secretary of Defense, and I actually did media training, which was really interesting. And so I was training these people on how to present themselves and how to give off this thing. But there's this magic, right, that is charisma. And yes. I think you have to start with that, right? You have to have something in you that's genuine, and I actually think it's very empathetic. I say it's this quality that allows you to be able to influence others when you talk and when you speak. And it's I always say work is really a combination of two things, right? It's talent and culture, and that culture part to me is really what is so important from leadership that many of us don't get. And I do have a side job I do that actually makes me money doing corporate work. So I know, and I've sat as a CEO of a company, and I've done these things and realized. So
the power of the spoken word, and that's my life's mission, to empower people through the spoken word. I didn't realize that's what I came here to do, but that is what my mission is. And, as you well know, when you're working with these politicians and generals and people of that nature, your ability to present yourself is critical. And when you talk about culture, it's not enough just to have the skills. You have to, you don't speak in isolation. You're in a culture, and you need to be able to bob and weave to meet the needs of people. And sometimes what happens is you come in and you meet a group that is not with you. They're not on the same page. And that's why when you talked about, could I come and speak about bullying, I thought, you know what, a lot of times we don't talk about the audience as bully. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important thing to think about, because it's so easy to be intimidated, Alan, as you know.
Yeah.
And just speaking is intimidating to people. But when you get in front of a group that is challenging you, it can be threatening. And so I want to share some things I've learned along the way that will help people when they encounter those difficult audiences. And by the way, when I say audience, it doesn't mean you're in front of 100 people. It could be a meeting. And there are a lot of meetings that turn hostile or difficult where people are bullying others. So I want to give you some tips. And the first thing that came to mind when we talked about the audience as a bully was one of my first situations when I first started my business. I landed my first corporate account. It was a financial services company, large multinational bank. And I spent most of the time in the development of the curriculum. Finally, the day came when I was going to deliver these seminars. It was 70 MBAs, so you can imagine, even before I walked in the room, what that was going to be like. And the problem there was, it was a credit training program that they were in, and their manager scheduled their first credit exam the day after my training. And so they were fuming, and they were not going to go for it because they wanted that day to study. And the manager said, don't worry, it's only 3 hours. But it wasn't. It was a full day. So I heard they went into his office and they were going to boycott me. And I grabbed the human resource person. I said, you know what? Let's reschedule. And she said, no. Too bad about them. The show must go on. So can you imagine the night, 4 o'clock that evening, before I left for the day, their manager calls me, and I can remember his parting words. Diane, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes tomorrow. Now imagine, I'm first starting out. This is my first big gig, and this is what I'm walking into. I will honestly tell you, I considered calling in sick the next day.
Yeah.
But I knew it was going to be career suicide, so that was not an option. So I gathered all my strength, and that morning I walked in feeling like I was walking into a lion's den, and this is what I did. I said, first of all, I looked them straight in the eye, and I said, what's important to you is time. You want time to study for your exam. What's important to me is quality. I want to be able to give you quality training. How can we make them work together? And then I got quiet and I listened. And what we ended up doing is negotiating for a half day. So I agreed. I took out a lot of the extra exercises. Let me tell you, Alan, that was the most focused group I have ever worked with. We got through it. They got their half day to study. I remained unscathed. Now, if you asked me, did they like you? I would say no. They did not want to be there.
Yeah.
It did not change anything. But the idea is I handled it so that I was not bullied. I stood my ground. So here are the lessons that I learned. Number one, own the room. You walk in with confidence even if you're quaking. I teach people how to don the body language of confidence, as you will know, as you do as yourself. Go in there. Then name the elephant in the room. State that you know what's going on. Address their needs and then listen. And be willing to negotiate and then stand your ground. State what you want. State your purpose. Don't back down. But see if there is a way that we can do both and not either or. And then use an anchor. Now, one of the anchors I used is after I said, how can we make this work together? I clasped my hands in front of me, in front of my chest, as a way of subliminally getting them to think of togetherness, bonding. And it worked. So those are some of the lessons I've learned over the years. And this is the reason I included Chapter 10 in Knockout Presentations. It's called Difficult People, Q&A, and Deadly Disasters. I've spelled these things out. And I also have a channel on my YouTube channel. I have a playlist on difficult audiences.
Oh, yeah.
Or difficult people. So people can take a look at that. And I named some of the difficult personalities.
Well, and you brought up something that's really cool that I spend a lot of time thinking about. One of the reasons I wanted to become a certified coach was because I'm a talker. I mean, obviously I'm doing a podcast, right? So I love to talk. And one of the problems of being a talker, and certainly internally once you get to know yourself, is that I listen to reply all the time, right? I'm always listening, and I want to say something, and I feel like it's going to leave my head, and so I'm an interrupter, and I'm all of these things. And you mentioned how, you walked in as a presenter, and you actually listened to understand, which is what coaching is all about. Where you said, okay, I'm not going to just talk. You're not going to just listen. Tell me what's going on. And listen to understand, which is not to reply. Like you said, you're sort of in a no-win situation, right? So you're listening to understand what their situation is, and you spent, half a day getting to a negotiation where at least the day wasn't a total loss, right?
Exactly. And we got to that agreement pretty quickly. They wanted out of there. And I did too, in a sense. I didn't want to be beat up. So it worked out well. And there's something else that I learned as well, because I had another situation. And the reason I want to share these stories is people think, when you've been out there 20 years, you don't have any of this, or, it's been smooth sailing. No, it hasn't. And we all have our little battle scars. But when I was working for another company, it was a transportation company, they sent me out to one of the offices. And I remember people being really negative. I was doing management training. And no matter what I said, they had an excuse and how their management mistreated them. And finally, I said to them, these are skills that you can use with your people. We can't change the way your management is treating you, but you can change the culture. You can change what you do. And what I did is I found a live wire. So what I applied was peer pressure. There was one positive person in the room, and I always played to him. And I would ask him questions, and he would agree with what I said. So he was showing them that it could be done. So I want to let people know that peer pressure is one of the most powerful techniques. So when you're in a meeting and you are not the leader and you don't have the position authority, you can use the power of the group when someone's coming at you. So here's what happens. When you have someone coming at you, if you keep going head to head, that becomes a lose-lose situation. Because even if you win the round, you lose. And you risk having the group become hostile. So when you have one person like that, it's better to allow the group to come to your defense and not to get defensive. So I developed this 3D strategy for handling conflict, and it's depersonalize, I'm trying to remember my own words, depersonalize, detach, and defuse. And so the first thing is don't take it personally. It's usually not about you. The reason people are hostile is because either they're fearful or there's an unmet need in the room. And if you can figure out what that need is, you'll be on your way to solving the problem and working with a bonded group.
And it's interesting you talk about that. One of the things that I always say, and this is just in bullying in general, is, there's two ways that people think. And there really are only two ways that people think in hostile situations, right? Someone is being hostile, angry, whatever. You can either say, what's wrong with me or what's wrong with them? And the way you respond to that question will tell you a lot about yourself and your confidence. And again, if you're going to get up and speak in front of a group, you got to realize there's going to be a lot of what's wrong with them's out there. For whatever reason it is. I mean, I've talked to small groups and large groups, and it's always the same. And I think you were even bringing up where you try to find that person that's being responsive to you, with the head nods or the whatever it is, that the eye contact, and then you, at least me, I was taught, try to use them. Try to use them to your benefit, where they're obviously listening and in agreement with you. So, they may be a powerful person in the room because now it's not just you who they don't know, but someone maybe they know. And so I've always done that. Plus, the idea of looking around, always scanning, letting people know you're there with everybody. Of course, when I speak, but I've had interesting things happen to me where, I was a very confident speaker and I spoke my bullying stories. That was really where I started this whole gig about bullying. But what I found is when I started telling them, I hadn't dealt with them, and I was crying and I was emotional, and I wasn't detached from my speech. And while that was very powerful, I think, for a room full of people, it didn't help me. You know what I mean? So what was that? What if you were to say as a speaker, it's almost like when you talk to an actor and they cry on stage and you say, how do you do that? And they go, well, I just do. But then I'm an actor, right?
Right.
Speakers are really like actors, and I did acting for a while. I think that's why I like speaking.
Well, I have to tell you, I cannot cry on demand. but I will say this, that what you just said, it's mindset. And I can tell you a situation that happened when I was speaking at a scientific type conference, and it was on public speaking. They brought me in because these scientists would read their papers. That is the culture, and it needed to change. So one of the things I said from the stage was, I can read as well as you can. If you're reading, you don't sound like an expert. And then I talked about using PowerPoint in a way that was more effective instead of reading the slides. Well, at one point, the person in front of me in the first row took out his laptop, and I remember it vividly. It was a Mac. And he started typing, and I thought, oh no, he's checking his email. He's checked out. He doesn't like what I'm saying. And at that very moment, Alan, I said, nope, I think he's taking notes on what I'm saying.
Yep.
I made that mental shift. I gave myself a different message. I don't know what he was doing, but I didn't give my power away. I had the power to change the way I thought, and I carried on. So, to your point, it really begins with your mindset.
Mm-hmm. And I think your self-confidence, and that's where mine was eroding at the time, and then since then I've built it back up to where it needs to be. But I just had an incident at work where I invited this guy. I also talk about this problem of bringing experts into a room, and I'll tell you what I mean really quickly. I believe in the 4 squares of learning, and if you know anything about the 4 squares of learning, it starts with you don't know what you don't know,
right?
And then you know what you don't know, then you learn what you don't know, then you're an expert at what you didn't know. And then I always said to people, who's the one that you want speaking to you, teaching you? And they're all like, the expert. I said, no, you don't. You want the teacher, because they just learned it and they're excited about it. The experts kind of checked out. They just know how to do it. It's like they get on the keyboard, they're a programmer, okay, it's done. It's like the old joke
here's the other thing I discovered, Alan, about experts. This isn't true of everybody, but often the expert may come from ego. And when you have someone like that in the room, the expert know-it-all, that's when you're going to get a little bit of resistance or hostility. They're going to be a problem. And so they're one of the easiest people to manage so that they don't dominate and bully the group. And the way you do that is you give them what they need, which is recognition.
Right.
And I remember one time I was working for a agri company, and there was some person in the room, and he said, oh, presentation skills. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you already said. Been there, done that. And I thought, oh, great. This is wonderful. This is going to be a great seminar. But what I did is every time we spoke, I'll call him Joe. I'd say, now, Joe, you've done this a lot. What's your experience been? Or, well, Joe, what do you think about that? Well, I have to tell you, Joe was no problem that whole day because he was getting his needs met. So again, if someone's really bullying, very severe bullying, that's a whole different thing where you really have to back them down. But when someone is responding because their needs are not being met, as soon as you figure out the need, all you have to do is give it to them. But here's the problem speakers make. They come from their egos as well. And so now it's ego hitting ego. That's where you want that second D, detach. Detach your ego. It's not about you. It's about them. If you're the speaker, if you're running the meeting, it's about how you can facilitate and get the information from them and bond that group.
Right. Well, we got to take a quick break, Diane. But when we come back, I want to tell you a couple of quick things that I've heard and see what you think about them in terms of public speaking. So hold on a second. We'll be right back with more Healthy You. Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here with Diane DiResta, certified public speaking professional, who we're talking about bullying that actually takes place with professional speakers and speaker events, which isn't as surprising as you might think. In fact, I have two kind of stories I'd like to tell you, Diane, and see what you think. One is that we were talking about being an expert, and one thing this guy I worked with once told me, who was very bright, a very bright gentleman who was involved in computer services, and he said, and I watched him, and he would go to a meeting, and he would listen to this guy, and he would always ask a really stupid question. And I'm like, what the heck? And so one day he finally confided in me, and he's like, I want to give you a piece of advice when you go to hear a speaker. He goes, be the stupidest guy in the room. He goes, because the speaker, that feeds them. And so also you'll never find out what they know or don't know if you don't ask. So what he was saying was if I came into the room and I knew more than the speaker, so again we were talking about that expert idea. And if I know more than the speaker and he says something and I go, well, nani boo boo, I know more than you. Here, let me tell you something. He said at that point the speaker's done. They will no longer speak as an expert because they know someone in the room is smarter than them. And I thought that was so interesting a technique. I use it to this day. It's like I'll just ask a stupid question because there's going to be a nugget that guy knows that I don't know. And I won't get that from him if I sit there and act like I'm the smartest guy. But yet, I'm sure, as you know, some people like to go to meetings and play that game.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
The dumbest question?
No, the guy who's the opposite, who's trying to prove you're no expert. You're not an expert. I know more than you.
Yeah, that's the know-it-all. In a sense, what sometimes works is the same thing with the true expert, where you ask them for their input, but it only works if they know something. If they're saying things that are nonsense and not accurate, then that's going to be a problem. So then you need diversionary techniques. Well, that's an interesting point. What does everybody else think? And then try to facilitate a discussion and then bring it into another direction as a skilled facilitator. I would try to get him off the topic of something like that. I mean, sometimes people ask irrelevant questions or you've already talked about that. So yeah, that can be a bit of a challenge. I would try to use the power of the group.
Yeah, I also think that you shouldn't fear it. Like, for me, yeah, it's like you said, the power of the group or the power of this person. If they are really talented, like one time we were doing Train the Trainer and I was teaching PowerPoint. And I'm a pretty good PowerPoint person. At least I think so. And this guy, we were talking about, hey, if you want people to focus on you, put the cap on the projector and don't let them focus on the back of the projector. And he says, well, why don't you just press the B button?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? And I press the B button and the screen goes black. And I'm like, you're kidding me.
Did you say thank you?
Yeah, and exactly. I said, well, that's great. Do you have any other tips? I didn't discredit what he was saying. I was basically, great. There's somebody in the room who knows tips. Because I'm giving tips, I'm telling people how to do things. This guy knows a couple, so...
See, that goes back to ego.
Right.
If you are detached from your ego and you stay curious, that's a really good place to be, because it's, really, tell me more. Thank you for that. Now there's no bullying going on. But once you become defensive and you have to prove that you know more than they do, you're the one who's threatened, and now... you're, in a sense, the bully, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I actually had...
It can go both ways.
And I had a really weird thing happen once, As I've said, I'm this person who does these activities, right? I'm a anti-bullying person. I don't like bullying. I consider myself pretty peaceful. And this one guy was just at work antagonizing everything I said, antagonizing in this meeting, very small meeting of him, me, and our boss. And I finally, it hit a peak where I just, I'm no more perfect than anybody else. I just kind of blew up on him. And I said, if you're going to keep doing that, and all this. And then he storms out of the room.
Well,
and then the story gets exaggerated. Oh, go ahead.
When you're dealing with a real bully like that, you do have to confront them.
Yeah.
And they have to be stopped. I'm not talking about people who are always like that, but I'm talking about in general when you're encountering hostility. But when you've tried everything and it's not working, you do sometimes have to confront them.
Yeah, and I think that was my point of bravery, where he had issues, and that's the thing is I'm very empathic, so I can tell when people have issues, and it's again what's wrong with them. It's like I'm not doing anything, I'm being me, and I'm not that kind of person, So even after this thing that happened, he went back and he exaggerated the story to say that I actually put my fists up like I was ready to fight him. And I said to my boss, I said, you were there. This did not happen. But in this guy's mind.
It's interesting about perception. But, someone gave some advice. I don't remember who it was said, but he said, never assume the audience is damaged. And I think that's a good place to start. Because if you look at everybody having value and being on an equal playing field, then you respond differently. And then they have a chance to disprove your theory. But I think if you come with that mindset, you can eliminate or reduce some of the bullying right from the get-go.
Right. I think that's great. Wow, that's excellent.
Yeah. Never assume the audience is damaged. And I think that's good advice for all of us. And, when you think about bullying, yes, there are some people who are bullies by nature, and they continue to do that. But a lot of the time, it's situational. Something has happened and someone in the moment got threatened or they had a bad day or whatever. And so having that mindset and being able to use these skills will serve all of us really well. You don't have to be a speaker to use these skills. Right. They're communication dynamics. But again, if you go to chapter 10 in Knockout Presentations, I've spelled out how to do that, and I've delineated the different kinds of personalities and how to handle them.
The other thing I think, and it's the people that I like to hear the most, who share self-effacing stories, that they're not going to sit there and tell you about what other people do wrong. They'll tell you about themselves, because we're all imperfect. And I love it when people do that. When Brene Brown is one of my favorite speakers, and I don't know if you've listened to her, but she's just so self-effacing. She's, so honest with her approach with her audience, and immediately brings them into her life.
And it's very powerful. And it took me many, many years to realize the importance of having a vulnerability story, because I always tried to come out as the confident expert, I'm credible, I know what I'm talking about. And then I realized that people are coming from a place of fear, and they're thinking, well, I can't do that. So now I start with my story when I was a freshman in college and being closed out of every 3-credit class except a public speaking class. And the gist of the story was I got really nervous and my shoulders were shaking, and someone commented on my shoulders shaking in the class. And I was mortified, but I stayed and I got a B in the class. And the learning there was that I was not a standout. So it's all about skill, and if you stick it out and you keep practicing, you can be really good. I never thought I would be doing this for a living. Yeah. So the self-effacing and the vulnerability stories humanize us. And the other thing that happens is sometimes people get scared when something goes wrong and they don't know how to recover. And if you can take it in stride and recover with grace and not take it personally, not beat yourself up, just embrace it, laugh at yourself, you'll also reduce the amount of bullying in that way too, because you won't give them the fodder that they need. And
that goes back to my belief. I always tell people, there is no such thing as perfection. We only learn when we make mistakes.
Exactly.
And so it's like inevitable. I bought a laptop and I went to my first presentation when I started doing this work, and the laptop only had an HDMI plug in it, and of course I had a 13-pin or 15-pin projector to plug into. My whole shtick is using this project. This show I do, and I put a lot of time into my PowerPoints and my show. And yeah, it was just like, oh, I guess I got to go on Amazon and order that. So tell me more. So we've heard about Chapter 10. Tell me more about Knockout Presentations, your book. What else do you talk about, and how can people get it?
I wrote the book as a seminar in a book, so it's the next best thing to having me live. So I have exercises and checklists, and it's everything from soup to nuts. So everything that you need to know. Someone once called it the Bible of public speaking, and it's been used extensively in colleges. I asked one professor, how did you decide on this? And she said, I did a search on Amazon, and yours by far was a standout. So she continued to use it. So it's really meant to be a guide to help people in all phases of public speaking and presentation. Then in 2014, I wrote an ebook called Give Fear the Finger, and it's strictly confidence. So where Knockout Presentations is everything from soup to nuts, this is just the confidence piece, all the things that you need to deal with public speaking anxiety and nerves. And it's a double entendre, because after reading this book, Success Under Stress, I learned about a technique where there's an acupressure point on the third finger behind the knuckle, and if you press on that, it relieves anxiety. And so you're literally giving fear the finger. So that was the most recent book that I wrote.
That's awesome. God, that's a great discovery. Yeah. And, there are
lots of ways to deal with that.
Yeah, and I always tell people,
I don't want to leave this podcast without assuring people that at some point you will encounter that situation, that audience from hell that you dread, and you can handle it. You can manage it. There are skills. Anybody can do it. It's just learning what to do.
Yeah, and again, I think as people who are a part of my audience know, I talk about mindfulness and how to stay in the present and how to not worry about the past or the future and all of it. And it's these same techniques, right? You could do a little meditation or a little mantra before you get up on stage, or whatever it is that relaxes you. Find something to do. Breathe. All these people don't breathe. That's a biggie. It's like they get up there and they're so nervous. And I
am now spending the first 5 minutes of coaching sessions with some of my executives doing meditation. Yeah. I have an app on my phone, and we start because they need to get grounded.
Oh, which app do you use?
It's called Take a Break.
Oh, I use Calm, which is a really good one.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't matter as long as you have something.
Yeah.
Even if it's affirmations. I have online, in Give Fear the Finger, I have a link to an affirmations video. And it's music and all these affirmations popping up that you can read or say out loud as they're popping up. It's really important to program yourself for confidence.
Yeah, I keep my wife has given me this, and I keep it at my desk. And it's a funny story because she's given it to me twice because she forgot she gave it to me the first time, which isn't a good sign, right? But it's a very simple saying that Eleanor Roosevelt said many years ago, which is, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift, and that's why it's called the present.
Yes,
and I just sit with that at my desk, and I look at it every day. And I look at it every day. And then, of course, I have my refrigerator magnet because my wife forgot. She gave me the other print. But it's my favorite. It's like, that's what it's about. It's only about right now. Everything else, nothing.
Well, that's such an important point that you bring up, Alan, because when people are nervous, I know that they're living in the future.
Oh, yeah.
They're thinking of all the things that can go wrong. So to your point about mindfulness, when you find yourself in that state, especially when you're feeling like someone's bullying you, come back to your breath. Yep. Get quiet. You don't have to respond right away. Take in a breath. Get grounded. Get back into your body.
Right. And as you know, that's the whole meditative start, right? And I'm with you. When I coach people, we start with a 5-minute I tell them we're going to do 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation because I need them clear-headed. I need them to be thinking not about what they're thinking about, which is just a typical thing that anybody does, right? It's get rid of that, and then we can look for your path forward. I can't help you if you're sitting there ruminating about tomorrow's work. That's not gonna So I use it professionally as well, and I think it's great to hear that other people do because, yeah, it works, and that's what we know.
You can see the difference.
Yeah,
From
five minutes.
Scattered,
Yeah.
even the eye contact. And I had one woman. I said, "Stop, look at me. You're not looking at me. Focus.
Right.
Let's stay. Let's ground." And it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that to everybody, regardless of whether you're encountering a bullying audience. Yeah. It's a good daily practice. But I do want to tell your listeners that I wrote a blog post that will be live on the 11th, which is Thursday, and it's called "When the Bully is the Audience." So it's a post that will tell you what to do, and it'll reiterate the story that I told you so that you know that it happens to everybody.
Okay. Is that going to be on your site?
It'll be on my site, so you would go to DiResta.com/blog.
Okay.
And on Thursday, it should be live.
Well, I'll definitely link straight to that, and I'll also link straight to your website, of course, and your book's available on Amazon and all.
On Amazon, both of them.
Okay. Well,
I've got presentations and give fear the finger.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's great to talk to you about this subject because I think a lot of people, I always think of Jan Brady. Remember, the old Brady Bunch, and remember they said, think of everybody in their underwear. And so when I ever think about public speaking, I always go back to that. I'm like, oh, you got to think like Jan Brady. But it's not a bad idea, right? She was nervous. Someone gave her something else to occupy her mind. It works, and I always hearken back to that for some reason.
Well, it's humanizing. As someone said, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. It's like we all take a shower. We all go to the bathroom. We're human people. Don't give people so much power.
Right, exactly. Well, it's been great talking to you. I have one last question I ask my guests, and I'm going to look forward to your answer because I'm sure you're going to have a really good one. So what is the one thing you're doing today that you changed to make yourself a healthier you?
Let me think about that. One thing I changed today to make myself... Well, I had... Do you mean physically?
No, it could be just either one. Like, what do you do? What do you do differently than you did in the past?
I learned that I had certain allergies, so I don't eat gluten. I don't eat dairy. I don't eat red meat. And I don't eat too many nuts. And that has made a difference. So I eat better than I used to eat. I meditate. I was meditating 10 minutes a day. I'm now 20. So incorporating that into my daily routine. And a lot of times it's hard. So I do it in my commute. When I'm on a ferry, I put my headphones in, and that's my time to meditate.
Yeah, and people
making time for that.
That's what people don't understand is they think meditation is some quiet room on a cushion doing this thing. No, I always say music is very meditative for me. Like my favorite music, just sitting listening to it. Like I go to the gym. I had to do a 180 on my diet, on my whole life to start to feel better. And boy, do I feel better. And one of the things I started doing was going to the gym, and I am by no means a workout person, never was not athletic. But when I go, I put on my headphones, and it really doesn't matter what exercise I'm doing. It's just me and the music, and that's for an hour, and then I'm done, and I feel great. Not only did I exercise to make me feel great, but the music makes me feel good.
Right. So it's mind and body.
Right, and so that's great that you're doing that because I think people have to understand what we put in us affects how we appear outward. And that's being proven now, obviously. We learn more about gluten and allergies. And, I have another person I get to talk to who talks about, how big autoimmune is these days. And how, it's really now coming to light that a lot of these things that affect us are autoimmune disorders that we just never had any awareness of.
Well, everything that you do to help yourself, whether it's your mind or your body, is going to make you stronger. And when you're stronger and you're more confident, you're going to be able to handle life's challenges. So my goal was to give your listeners some tips on when they do encounter these hostile or bullying audiences. And I invite all of them to go to the website, DiResta.com. You can /blog and get the post. And also the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Diane DiResta, and I have more videos for them as well.
Great.
So, Alan, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being on, Diane. I really was a pleasure talking to you. And thanks for talking about the whole bullying angle, because it is, or at least the aggression angle. You know, it's funny, like one of the first courses I ever took when I went into my professional career was how to handle difficult people. And I still think back to that. I'm like, I wonder if that was like a hint for me. Like,
there you go.
but you'll always encounter them, and certainly in public speaking. And I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your book and your knowledge and everything you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Great. So this is Alan Eisenberg. Please join us for another episode of Healthy University.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.